away. So again, when patents expire, all that income goes away. Luckily, of course, we knew when the patent was going to expire. So we warned and warned and warned the administration at all levels, and we've been telling them 5 years before it was going to expire that it was going to expire. Because I knew that it was, I also squirreled away a lot of money and had a good savings account to help us through the rainy day. Now, I did the bad thing. I retired when the income started coming down, but I gave the successor has inherited that rainy day fund. And so, of course, the 15%, we still have income, right? It's like at 40 million now. So 15% of that is some money that goes back to support the office. And then we have pretty much money, a fair amount of money squirreled away to supplement that. So again, you have to be optimistic. There may be an invention that does really well and that we're surprised. Many times, some of these equity holdings, you can't predict when they're going to be acquired, when it's going to go public. So those are surprising cash outs. And then I think something good will happen in the future to offset some of this declining royalty. But the problem is a lot of the inventions that really make money are older inventions, and they're slowly expiring their patents.
I have some question. Does the university consider that technology licensing office as the revenue unit or income office of the university?
It's interesting because as I showed you in the early, very, very early slide, what is it? It takes $6 billion to run the university a year. So our highest year was about $108 million. And that's total, and then let's say we give 1/3 to the inventors. So 60 million, let's say, is not very much as a revenue generator. It's what we call icing on the cake. It's lucky money, and in fact, our two of the big inventions were for the Department of Genetics, and they were very, very lucky to get a lot of money over many years from two big inventions, but now it's gone away for them too. I mean, for them, they were able to expand, but now they're going to have to self-suffice on the money that they have. So I don't think the university really considers us a revenue generator. We were never pressured to make more money, which I think is very unusual. One of the problems that I see with many university presidents is that they would like tech transfer to be a revenue generator. It's not reliable money. If it's a big winner, either the patent is going to expire or somebody's going to challenge it, and it then can go away immediately. And the other thing is it's not predictable, because some days you'll have a lot of money and other days you won't have any. So again, it's extra money. It should be viewed as extra money.
To follow up the question regarding the benefit sharing policy, I noticed that many benefit sharing policy. I noticed that many university TLO in the States use the 1/3 ratio as a norm. Could you share with us what is the justification of Stanford using this ratio, if you could?
Honestly, it was because it was simple. You know, there's some universities that have a fairly complicated, and even the Cambridge was, you know, if it was below something, it was more percentage to the inventor, and they had 3 tiers. We just said 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, easy to explain, easy to administer. When you have that tiered thing, then you have to calculate the royalty, how much it is, and it might be this much for this year and that much for next year, et cetera. It gets complicated. So we do believe in keeping it simple. Was Stanford involved in the TheraKnows patent and licensing? Aha, you've heard of them. Luckily, no. Now, I don't remember, one of the faculty members at Stanford said that they disclosed the invention to Stanford, and we said it wasn't Stanford's. She was an undergrad, remember? And so I don't remember the disclosure coming in, and we don't have a record of it. But in any case, maybe we just decided it wasn't ours and we didn't even have a record of it. So we weren't involved in the patent and licensing of TheraKnows. Lucky us.
You've mentioned earlier that the conflict of interest is something you can manage. Can you elaborate a little bit more of what is the process to manage the conflict of interest? And do you have the policy like self-declare, or you have any committee to take a look at the issues?
Many universities in the US have committees. I would have to say, in general, don't have a committee structure. We have a conflict of interest person who reviews the conflict of interest for different schools. We have a medical school person who handles the conflict of interest, and then we have another person that handles all the other schools. Now, with medical inventions and conflict of interest, we're a little bit more sensitive because often it involves patients, and we want to make sure that all of this is very above board because we don't want any patients to be harmed. So if it is a more difficult situation, they have a small committee in the School of Medicine to handle the more difficult ones. But in general, it doesn't go to a committee. In general, this conflict of interest person can decide. We have mandatory disclosure every year for all faculty to disclose their outside consulting activity, outside professional activities. It's called OPACs. And so every year they need to describe what they are. They don't have to say how much it is that they're getting, but they have to say who they're consulting for. And in the US, there are rules from the federal government which requires us to review them and report to the federal government if there's some conflicts that are not manageable. By and large, most everything is manageable, and the faculty is 100% reporting. They'll get in trouble if they don't report. So in technology licensing, for instance, as I mentioned, we write a letter to describe why we chose this licensee, the startup, to be the chosen one. The faculty will write a letter to their dean, and they will describe how they're going to separate their research and how they're not going to involve their students. Now, if the conflict of interest person reviews this and says this is okay, what they'll do is do a training. Typically, they will often go into the laboratory and talk to everybody in the laboratory, one meeting, to talk about conflict of interest and how it shouldn't, someone's personal financial gain shouldn't influence the results of the research. And so it's very open and transparent. If anybody in the laboratory of this faculty has any questions, they know they can come to a person to discuss the issue. So we try to make sure that everyone in the laboratory, there's not a lot of secrets among the students and versus the faculty. Even then, it's fairly tricky. There are always cases when some student feels disadvantaged by some faculty. Now that can happen anyway without conflict of interest, but it will sometimes be magnified if there is the appearance of conflict of interest. So we care about perceived and actual conflict of interest because, again, we really feel that we're an institution of public trust and we need to manage this. Now, in the United States, there's been several articles recently about conflict of interest and how it doesn't look good, right, for some institutions. And so I think everybody's fairly sensitized to this because a school like Stanford doesn't want to be in the front pages. We like to be known for our science and integrity, but we don't want to have any kind of scandal. So we're pretty careful about conflict of interest. Way back there.
I realized that to run an office of your office is quite a challenging task, and you have to do a lot of things that you cannot control of. My questions, two questions. What is your strategy to drive your office, to drive the goal of technology licensing? And my second question is, how is you evaluated by your superior?
Well, the last question is always very interesting. You know, we're a really old office, and as I mentioned earlier in the talk, I always kept our leadership, my boss is the Dean of Research, very much informed. So, as I said, they've never pressured us to make more money, and we will always bring problems up to her, because many of the issues are not actual issues for OTL, but policy issues. What do you think the university's policy should be? How should we interpret the policy? So we worked very closely with them. So you asked how we're evaluated. I asked her, how are we evaluated? How do you evaluate? How do you know that we're doing a good job? She says, not many faculty complain about you. And by and large, I think we have a good reputation. So it's a little bit that soft stuff. It isn't about making a certain amount of money, because as I said, that fluctuates. But if we're rational about solving some of the problems and our bosses understand, I think they've always trusted us. We've been very, very lucky to have a pretty steady policy interpretation. Our office has always gotten support from higher ups. They think it's a good activity. We've not gotten them in trouble. So again, they've appreciated the office that way. The strategy, how do we keep the strategy of doing licenses? We talk about it a lot. There are a lot of hurdles to doing licenses. You know, one company wants something that's unreasonable, or an inventor wants something that's unreasonable, or they want us to file on something that we think has no value. Again, as I said, sometimes we don't really know. We've had inventors insist that we file on something when we don't think it's possible to get patent protection, and lo and behold, we got patent protection and they did something good with it. We have horror stories, I mean not horror stories, but we had an invention where we asked a patent attorney, is this patentable? And they said no, so we dropped it. It was data visualization. And so a year later, the graduate student had graduated and wanted to start a company around this technology, and came back and said, we want to start a company around this technology, can you give us a license? Well, we didn't even have anything filed on it, and so we rushed and filed something. So a lot of times in licensing, it's a little bit of an illusion, because who knows if the patent's going to issue, but they can say we have an exclusive license from Stanford. So the students started a company called Tableau. If you're interested in data visualization, they started this company, Tableau. It was a very cheap license because, of course, we had dropped the case. And then we took some equity, and they were stealth. We actually didn't know what they were doing for about 10 years, and then all of a sudden they went public. And so we generated about $24 million, again, on a technology that we had originally dropped. Now, is that good news or bad news? I think it's good news, because they came back and said, we want to take a license from Stanford. And what it meant was, okay, we listened. And we gave them a license, but we took the risk with them. We said, well, we had dropped it, so we can't ask for a lot of cash up front, right? So we took some equity and we took some cash up front and just said, go in peace. Now, again, Yahoo came, the Yahoo kids came and said, well, we developed this platform in our dorm. We don't think it belongs to Stanford because it was not part of our schoolwork. And so again, we said, okay, it's not Stanford's, so go in peace. And they started Yahoo. Now, is that good or bad? They have given Stanford so much money. We have a building, Yamakasi and Yang building. And again, we were fair, we weren't grabby. If it wasn't belonging to Stanford, we didn't claim it. And then people then appreciated. Same with Jim Clark, who started Silicon Graphics. He took a very modest license. And I'm not saying you should go for modest licenses necessarily, but we didn't think something was patentable there. But we gave them a license anyway to whatever we could file on. They took a license, they did well. Jim Clark has funded a lot of, he built a building, the Clark Center at Stanford. And so they're more than just royalties in how we get the benefit back to Stanford. And Google is very close to Stanford. We helped them start. They're huge now, but they fund a lot of research at Stanford. They hire a lot of students, and we have a very close relationship. So again, that's a good one.
Just quick question. Besides the Google, in what field do you have the most license, and in what field do you generate the most money in Stanford?
So again, in the earlier group, I said that we view the world in life sciences and physical sciences. And by and large, almost all the universities in the US have more luck with life sciences. Life sciences understands patents, they understand long development, and they understand risk. So they are more willing to take licenses, early stage stuff. Physical sciences, typically like computer, Intel, hundreds and thousands of patents in one product. They don't see the value of one patent from a university. And frankly, many of the companies would just rather us go away. They think we're a nuisance because we come forward and say, will you take a license to this one patent? And the one patent in 500,000 patents is not worth a lot to them. They don't want to pay. So we understand that different industries require different financial terms. So for that kind of company, we might ask for a yearly payment. They don't have to pay an earned royalty, but they can pay us a yearly payment so they don't have to keep track of product, they don't have to keep track of sales. And they seem to be comfortable with that model. Sometimes it's a fully paid license. If they want a software and we just want to be done with it, we'll give them a fully paid license. So I think a tech transfer office, as they get more sophisticated working with different kinds of industries, will manage their technologies in a way that enables that particular industry to take advantage of those technologies. You want a break?
I think we talk a lot about patents and everything. What do you think about business process patent? Do you put values in them at all? Do you think they're commercializable, or do you put them as like second priority?
In the US, business process patents really aren't being issued very much unless they are written in a certain way. And for a very, very long time, I have not been in favor of writing software patents. And again, an algorithm is publishable and not so much protectable. Sometimes the code itself is very valuable. We have a linear and nonlinear program called Minos. It's existed since 1984, and it can be used for many, many applications. It was used to design the cup for the boat, what are those called? Boat races. And it's useful for grid manipulation and tracking. So we license that non-exclusively for different fields of use. And so it's just the code. It's copyrighted, not patented. So again, software code can be very valuable. Minos was one, and we had some CAD software, computer-aided design kind of software that we license extensively. We license biological material, as Cambridge talked about. Those are not patentable. That's very, very easy licensing. If you have a medical school or if you have biological materials to license, that's very easy, very simple to reagent companies. And you don't have to ask for very much, get earned royalties. show that you can do licenses. That is the most important thing. Show somebody that you can be successful in commercializing technology.
At your office, do you license in technology? And if you do you license in any technology from overseas research or IP?
We don't license in technology, basically. Among the universities in the US, for sure, we don't want ourselves to be so busy taking licenses from each other. And we feel that we don't want to take licenses from companies to do research. At a university, we're really doing curiosity-driven research. And there really is not a damage to a company if we use their intellectual property. So in general, we don't take licenses from companies or other universities.
Hi, me again. In terms of actually filing patents for OTL, I would like to know whether, how often do you actually file PCT? And extensively, with the expansion of China, sorry to say that, but how Stanford prepare for the invasion of Chinese, Chinese invention or Chinese innovation? Yeah, thank you.
So I would say we file PCT on maybe a quarter of the things we file. You know, the US, luckily, is a big economy in itself. So even Cohen Boyer, one of our big winners, was only a US patent. So we didn't file foreign on those. We weren't able to because they had already published. PCT, for us, gets very expensive, as it will be for you if you file foreign patents. So the US is a big enough market. If we think that the market is broader than the US, and typically that might be pharmaceutical industry, then we might file broadly, but if we don't have a licensee, it'll be very careful. We will file maybe a European patent, and then sometimes we're less comfortable now with Japan because the patents tend to be narrow and hard to enforce. In the past, we didn't file in China very much because we weren't very confident in their patent system, but they are trying to shore up the patent system. The other problem with China is that damages is still low, generally. So, but as they are getting more sophisticated in their patent system, we are starting to file there. So again, that's slowly. We are careful about licensing Chinese companies because, you know, we're not sure how their books are, how their royalty reporting, and so many times we'll feel that we just want cash. And so, because we can't keep track of their sales necessarily. So maybe it'll be a yearly fee or some upfront money, etc. So we try to be thoughtful in how we deal with China as they get more sophisticated and more control over their regulatory processes. I think we will deal more with Chinese patents.
Okay. Does your office have a role in educating researchers on intellectual property?
Oh yes, I feel like we have a big role in educating them. I think, as I said earlier, if someone hasn't invented, they're not interested. And then all of a sudden they invent something and then they're very interested. So again, that's one reason we meet with the inventors. Because when we meet with the inventors, that's an opportunity to educate them about intellectual property, particularly if they're new to this. And we tell them about patents, and we tell them about the tech transfer process, etc. The reality is we sometimes put on seminars for the whole university about intellectual property. And again, the honest truth is they don't come. It's not well attended until they're interested, right? So again, you can give a party, and if no one comes, there's sort of no point. So what we try to do is provide information in all the ways. As I mentioned, we have all the information on the website. We have printed information. We will meet with them. We will go to departmental meetings if they'll let us go. Some departments are not interested at all. They don't even want us to come. Others sort of beg us to come. And then we go to these meetings for the entrepreneurial groups on campus. A lot of graduate students are very interested in intellectual property. And I think the younger researchers seem to be more interested. And I think it's an area that every researcher needs to learn a little bit about early in their academic career, because you never know when you're going to invent something. They can always get more information later, but if they have a basic understanding of intellectual property, then that helps. We have 1 minute left.
In your opinion, what's going to be in next 10 years on technology transfers, university technology transfer in the next 10 years? What do you think, or what, I don't know how to say, like what is going to be in the field in next 10 years?
So I'm one of those who, in 1990, I thought it was going to go downhill. And it hasn't. It's just grown and grown and grown. Now, for instance, I definitely think in the next 10 years, all of Asia is going to be booming with technology transfer. Asia has been a little slower than Europe. First, it started, I think, in the US. And then it's moved to Europe, and they're getting more and more sophisticated. And Asia is learning more, too. So, as you know, Asian society is very innovative. And you will catch up really fast. You will grow technology transfer, and it's going to be a big activity. So it's an investment in your future, and I think it is going to be a growing activity in all of Asia, Thailand too. Time's up, it says.
Yes, that's all the time we have for the second session. Thank you very much.
So it's nice to have a smaller group, and you can ask more questions, I think. And the people with the microphones don't have to run around so far. All right, so the last two sessions were really informal. I just answered questions, and we just had a back and forth talking about anything that you had interest in talking about. So I've been in the business a really long time. I'm probably one of the oldest folks, and our office, is one of the oldest offices in the US. And so we have a lot of experience, and it's frankly not an easy job, but it's really fun. And I know that you're all interested in this topic, and people are very interested in Thailand in this topic. So feel free. Right here.
Earlier, you said something I thought was quite profound and very important. Message to all the universities out there is that you mentioned that you focus on licensing and not so much patents. I think that's really important, and every year it gets more important because technology becomes less important than the success of the startup, and particularly in software where open source is there, and you really don't need a patent. Do you have situations at the school where you have a startup team, or you have startups that you want to support that doesn't have a technology that can be patented, so you can't really license it, or but you want to continue to support them? You see the commercial potential in that.
So again, usually in Silicon Valley, if you want to do a startup, the investors like to see some proprietary position. So you can file on anything, as I said, and sometimes we'll just file on what we can file on. hoping that a patent will issue, but not really knowing whether one will. And over the course of time, during prosecution, many times the claims might change. So we license most of our technologies at the patent pending stage, before a patent ever issues. So none of the patents have a guarantee of issuing, but what we're doing is licensing hope and opportunity. Because even if you take a license to a patent pending, a pending patent, then you can show the investors that you have a proprietary position. And you can shape the patent then as the company grows and changes their product. You can make it more specific to the company. So in general, if they want the Stanford imprimatur, that it's a Stanford license, which adds credibility, then they will want us to file on something and then give them a license. Earlier I told the story of a student and faculty came to our office and had a data visualization kind of program. And we talked to the patent attorney, they said nothing to file here. So we dropped the case. A year later, the student wanted to start a company, and they wanted to start it around this technology. So we scrambled to find something to file on. We filed a patent and gave them an exclusive license. Because we had dropped the case, we couldn't ask for a lot of money. We asked for some money and some equity in the company. This company worked on the technology for about 10 years as a startup, growing slowly. But then they went public 2 years ago, called Tableau is the company. And those of you who work at data, it's a great data visualization program. And so out of our equity, on a technology that we had dropped, we made $24 million. Again, because they wanted to do a startup around it, and we believed in the people. And so we found something for them to start their company around.
Just follow on their story, but that means that because students really value your office, right? They know that what you can give them, what you can provide them. That's why they come back, even though you drop the case at the beginning when they want to start a startup, right? Well, just imagine if that happened, let's say in my university. So when they first walk